under low-risk case classification, which is one step higher than minimal risk status.
Nationally, we remain at minimal risk case classification with a negative 2-week growth rate at negative 57% and a low risk average daily attack rate at 0.67 cases per every 100,000 individuals. All regions have a total COVID-19 bed and ICU utilization at low risk or less than 50%.
There are 543 new COVID-19 cases today. More than 100 more people died, while 830 others survived. Active cases are at 13,500, excluding data from 5 testing laboratories, 2 that were not operational on December 4. As COVID-19 infections continue to drop, some schools in Metro Manila reopened today for limited face-to-face classes. AC Nichols reports education and local officials support the gradual expansion of the pilot program.
More students are physically back in the classrooms. This time, they include more than 2,000 public elementary and high school students from Metro Manila. 28 schools in the capital region got the go signal to begin holding limited in-person classes. Students and teachers are just happy to be reunited, though things are not what they used to be.
Tulad po ng mga groupings, yun, di na po namin magagawa ngayon yun. So talagang pinag-iisipan po ng mga teacher kung ano yung makakabuti sa kanila, na safe po sila sa pag-aaral nila.
Basic health protocols are strictly implemented, from temperature checks to hand disinfection. But it's not always easy to follow rules, especially among the younger kids.
Yung mga bata na hindi talaga sanay mag-face mask, no? Especially the young learners. So maya't maya, inubad nila yung face mask nila, no? Hindi maiwasan na nagdidikit-dikit sila. So all of these are part of the pilot study, no? So anong kailangan adjustment para maiwasan ito?
There were absences as well. At Pedro Cruz Elementary School in San Juan, over 80 students were supposed to come in, but only 62 showed up.
Mamaya po ay aalamin natin sa pamamagitan ng mga advisors kung ano yung mga naging dahilan ng mga bata na ito kung bakit hindi sila nakarating.
Still, education officials believe the pilot run for face-to-face classes has been a success so far. No COVID-19 cases have been reported among participating schools, and local officials support the gradual expansion of the pilot program.
Pag nasa mga bahay sila, tapos minsan pupunta pang mall, makikipaglaro sa kapitbahay, hindi naman natin makokontrol yun ng 100% eh. Lalo na sa mga lugar na maliliit talaga ang bahay. Hindi naman pwede nakakulong lang yung bata. 10 square meters na bahay, 3 yung bata. Expect mo ba talaga na hindi lalabas yan for 2 years?
Currently, there are around 300 public and private basic education schools holding limited in-person classes. The DepEd wants to continue expanding the list of schools reopening, hoping that the new Omicron variant will not cause a change of plan.
But for now, wala pa naman tayong advisory, no? Coming from the health experts from the Department of Health regarding the Omicron.
AC Nichols, CNN Philippines.
There is at least one school from every area in Metro Manila except Pateros that has reopened for the pilot program. But the COVID-19 situation in the region's lone municipality looks promising. In its tally on Saturday, December 4, the local government said it did not record any new COVID-19 infection. There is also no active case in Pateros. In a text message to CNN Philippines, Mayor Ike Ponce says the municipality remains COVID-free even until today. A research group believes the new COVID-19 variant of concern, Omicron, is twice as infectious as the Delta variant. Octa research fellow Guido David says he calculated the virus reproduction number of South Africa, which is seeing a surge in cases because of Omicron. David says the reproduction number is now at 4 compared to less than 2 in previous spikes caused by Delta. The expert says this strongly indicates that Omicron is highly transmissible and that a person is carrying it is likely to infect 10 to 16 people. Meantime, the health department says studies looking into Omicron are ongoing, but it may take weeks before its characteristics are known. The agency calls on local governments to ramp up testing, stressing its importance in detecting the new variant.
We cannot do our surveillance if testing is not being done. So for the past weeks, napapansin natin na bumababa ang mga testing outputs, especially coming from our collecting sites, no? Ang mga local governments, ang mga epidemiology and surveillance units natin. Kailangan mai-improve ho natin para makita natin kung sino talaga yung may sakit. Lalong-lalo na ngayon na mababa na yung kaso, lalong-lalo na ngayon na may threat tayo ng Omicron variant, we cannot 100% control prevent the entry of these variants. Ang ginagawa natin, we buy time when we prepare our system at gumawa tayo ng mga ganitong efforts. Sa ngayon, stricter border controls, biosurveillance.
Omicron has not been detected in 629 samples checked by the Genome Center. Samples from a COVID-positive traveler from South Africa and 11 returning overseas Filipinos, meanwhile, are undergoing sequencing. Results are expected on Wednesday. Now, the Omicron variant has prompted the United States to change measures for incoming travelers as it detects cases in more than a dozen states. CNN's Cole Higgins explains the new rules taking effect today.
Omicron is in the U.S. with cases of the coronavirus variant identified in at least 17 states.
And we're following them closely, and we are every day hearing about more and more probable cases, so that number is likely to rise.
Prompting U.S. officials to once again tighten air travel regulations. All inbound international travelers must test negative for COVID-19 within 1 day of departure for the U.S. starting Monday. The new order taking hold for all flights taking off after 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time. The new rule applies to all passengers 2 years or older, but there's no requirement for post-arrival testing or quarantine. The U.S. still restricting entry to travelers from South Africa and 7 other African nations. President Biden's chief medical advisor, Dr. Anthony Fauci, says the U.S. was in the dark about Omicron when that decision was made. Some South Africans say the travel ban is unfair.
We don't think it's fair because the way in which it's been imposed is quite uneven. And a lot of the responses in the last few days really just smacks of a very knee-jerk way of dealing with this pandemic. It goes against the solidarity that was promised to us at the beginning of this pandemic.
Fauci says the administration hopes to be able to lift the ban within a, quote, reasonable period of time.
I mean, we all feel very badly about the hardship that might have put upon not only South Africa, but the other African countries. And for that reason, in real time, literally on a daily basis, we're reevaluating that policy.
I'm Cole Higgins reporting.
Let's take a look at other global headlines. In Indonesia, at least 15 people are dead and dozens still missing after Mount Semeru erupted on Saturday. The volcano is located in Indonesia's East Java province. Hundreds of homes destroyed, displacing more than 1,000 people. Search and rescue efforts are ongoing, but one of the operation areas were affected after a river dam burst because of cold lava and heavy rain. In Myanmar, a court sentences deposed civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi to 4 years in prison for incitement and breaking health protocols. Suu Kyi is facing almost a dozen charges, adding up to combined maximum sentences of over 100 years, but she rejected all allegations. The verdict comes a day after military forces cracked down on a protest in Yangon, prompting condemnations from the U.S. and the United Nations. Suu Kyi was ousted and detained by the military in a coup in February. Coming up on Newsnight, authorities look into an ambush in Zamboanga City that killed a Basilan mayor and wounded another. And 2022 aspirants continue to make the rounds ahead of the polls. Find out where they try to court voters and what their latest campaign promises are next.
Blessings continue to pour in for the country's Olympic boxing heroes. 4 months since clinching a historic double silver and bronze in Tokyo, their hard work and triumph were rewarded with no less than a place they get to call home.
The best Christmas ever, kumbaga, yun po yung the best year The best year po to sa amin.
Sobrang saya po talaga. Hindi ma-explain.
On Sunday, silver medalist Nesty Petesio and Carlo Paalam, as well as bronze medalist Ymir Marshall, officially received their brand new house and lots in Tagaytay. A well-deserved reward worth a staggering 10 million pesos courtesy of the Philippine Olympic Committee. The lots, spanning 120 square meters each and situated next to each other along an Olympic lane. These on top of the cash incentives they received fresh from winning in Tokyo. A perfect Christmas gift for the Olympic medalists and their loved ones who are all eager to spend the holidays in their new home.
Magbibigay lang po kami ng ulam. Si Carlo sa breakfast, ako sa lunch, si Ymir sa dinner.
Itong mga blessing namin, ito po yung maging inspirasyon din po para sa mga ibang atleta na magpursige sila, disiplinahin nila yung sarili nila at balang araw sila din po yung makakaroon ng blessing na mga ganito.
The fight still continues for the country's newfound sporting heroes who vowed to never stop until they get the Olympic gold. But before they take another shot inside the Olympic ring, they will first test their mettle in the World Championships, 31st SEA Games, and 19th Asian Games, which will take place in 2022. Pauline Berzosa, CNN Philippines.
You're looking at possibly the worst-kept secret in the Secret Service. 00 hot stuff. A guy who protected the Bidens on vacation may now need protection himself from his fans. Wrestle me to the ground, please. Put me on his watch list. These two friends were in stitches after waiting for the Bidens in Nantucket, but focusing on whoever this beautiful man was instead.
She was like, wait, do you see that Secret Service guy? Like, he's so handsome. And I was like, oh my God. So then we both started videoing it.
Clip after clip went viral. This one was shot by photographer Matthew Notarangelo.
He just looked like somebody out of a magazine, like perfect hair, sunglasses.
He has a nice jawline.
Even Stephen Colbert couldn't resist the heartthrob.
Whoa. If he's there, who's manning the door at Abercrombie & Fitch?
Lots of people thought he looked like Tom Cruise, though we never got a good shot of 00 hot stuff without his sunglasses.
Yes, ma'am.
Online posters went gaga. What if I trip towards the president? Will this man catch me? He can Secret Service me any day. No comment from the Secret Service itself, though a source confirmed to CNN that he is an agent. But fans, when it comes to getting his number...
That's classified.
Jeannie Mose, CNN, New York.
Welcome back to Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines. A bloody December morning in Zamboanga City. 2 Basilan mayors were shot by 4 gunmen as they disembarked at the city's seaport. Albarca Mayor Darussalam Sagindilan Dahid and his driver died. Akbar Mayor Ali Awal Sali survived the ambush. An investigation is underway. Police say the suspects fled the scene aboard a white car and a motorized boat. National Police Chief General Jonard Carlos directed the PNP Area Commander for Western Mindanao to coordinate pursuit operations against the suspects. With Senator Bongo yet to formalize his withdrawal from the presidential race, election officials are expressing alarm over a crowd swarming outside the COMELEC headquarters. Go supporters have been gathering across Palacio del Gobernador in Intramuros since last week, hoping that the senator will still change his mind. COMELEC spokesman James Jimenez says Go has any time until before the proclamation of winners next year to officially withdraw from the race.
The prolonged uncertainty of whether a person is running or not is not conducive to orderly elections. Just so that you can get your crowds, just so that you can get your photo ops, you are endangering the lives of Filipinos who believe in you.
In a statement, Senator Go urged his supporters to stop crowding outside the COMELEC headquarters. He also appealed for respect and understanding for his decision. In 2016, Vice President Leni Robredo failed to win a single province in the so-called Solid North, dominated by her fiercest rival, Bongbong Marcos. But Robredo will attempt to change that in the 2022 presidential race as she visits the city of Baguio. Our senior correspondent, Anjo Alimario, reports.
The cold did not bother presidential aspirant Vice President Leni Robredo, who showed up early at Baguio City Hall. Mayor Benjamin Magalong welcomed Robredo, whom she worked with closely before, when she was still with PNP and she was still part of Bicol Advisory Group. Magalong says he and Robredo are completely aligned. They believe that good governance goes beyond politics. So is he endorsing a presidential aspirant?
I have. Sinabihan ko na rin naman siya. Nag-usap naman kami, yes. Hindi ko na babanggitin.
In Baguio and all the provinces in the northern region, Robredo faces an uphill battle in the May 2022 presidential elections. The so-called Solid North made its presence felt by giving Bongbong Marcos, the son of a late dictator, a landslide win against Robredo in 2016. But this doesn't discourage her at all.
If the volunteers will be able to sustain this kind of movement, malaki yung pagkakataon na makaabot yung mensahe sa mga kababayan natin.
Manila Mayor Isko Moreno, meanwhile, is in Cebu, meeting also with local officials of the province. He lauded the province's Sugbo Negosyo, which is designed to uplift the tourism industry amid the pandemic. But what highlighted the trip was his announcement of planning to adopt his party's fourth senatorial candidate.
Si President Duterte, hindi natin pwedeng tawaran yung kanyang kakayanan. He is a qualified candidate for the Senate.
Pero yung choices naman natin lahat, laging reflection siya ng aspirations natin. Lagi siyang reflection ng values na pinapaniwalaan natin.
Senator Panfilo Lacson, meanwhile, bared what he claims to be the ultimate test of characters for a leader. He stressed the need for the next president to uphold integrity as he recalled his time as then chief of the country's anti-kidnapping task force.
Isang na-kidnap noon, pagkatapos naming ma-rescue, bumalik, may dalang bag. Sabi ko, ano yan, chairman? Hindi, ito yung dahil natulungan niyo si Mr. Sibal, tumataw na ng utang loob. Sabi ko, no. Lagi ang sagot ko, we only did our duty.
Marcos, meantime, talked to the leaders of agriculture sector. He said he favors suspending the rice tarification law to help farmers.
Yung rice tarification law, kung babasahin mo yung batas, mukhang tama naman. Pero naging effect sa katotohanan is yun ang unintended consequences. Nagkaroon ng nasabayan pa tayo ng pandemic.
Caliori de Guzman, meanwhile, is in Eastern Samar. He put spotlight on the effects of large-scale mining to the environment and livelihood of communities. He said he will advance a, quote, just transition to green economy, unquote, as an alternative to mining and logging. In Baguio City, Anjo Alimario, CNN Philippines.
Two party list groups protested outside the COMELEC headquarters after the poll body rejected their 2022 bids with finality. Members of the Nurses United Party List took turns throwing tomatoes and a copy of the COMELEC logo to show their frustration. The group's president, Maristela Benojar, says the poll body has yet to give a formal explanation as to why they were denied a chance to vie for a seat in Congress.
Ang sinabi po ng COMELEC doon sa kanilang resolution noong October 1 ay hindi raw po namin sapat na patunayan na ang aming mga officers at members ng Nurses United Party List ay mga nurses. Pinatay po nila yung pag-asa ng mga nurses at mga manggagawang pangkalusugan. Pag-asa na magkaroon ng tunay na representante ng mga manggagawang pangkalusugan sa loob ng Kongreso.
There is a very specific requirement that you must show that your members are, at least a majority of your members are part of that sector that you're representing. I have faith in the resolution of the division. And if the division says it wasn't proven, then it wasn't proven.
A multi-sectoral group, Guardians, also protested against the denial of their accreditation. The COMELEC said they failed to prove that they have members who are farmers, urban poor, and laborers. The two groups are among 107 organizations rejected by the poll body, while 152 will land a spot on the ballot. Meanwhile, 13 groups still have pending status with the COMELEC. They include Mocha Uson's Mother for Change, former MMDA spokesman Celine Pialagos' Malasakit Movement, and Chef Boy Logro's Logro Cusinero. Food manufacturers want the suggested retail prices of basic goods adjusted to help them recover financial losses from the pandemic, but the Trade Department says the business sector's wish cannot be granted so easily. Cian Arcangel has that story.
Analita Verdin has to make frequent trips to the grocery store to buy goods so she can stretch her budget. She finds the suggested retail prices useful.
Nakakatulong po talaga yun. Kasi kagaya sa amin na mahirap, kailangan po namin ng mas mababang presyo po sana kasi napakahirap pong kumita ngayon ng kabuhayan.
But food manufacturers say it's time for the SRPs to be reviewed. They claim it's been 2 years since they were last adjusted. The Philippine Chamber of Food Manufacturers Incorporated wants the Trade Department to adjust the SRPs to reflect higher consumer demand. Manufacturers say they also need to recover losses they suffered because of the pandemic. But Trade Secretary Ramon Lopez says consumer demand isn't the only consideration in adjusting SRPs. He says the impact on consumers should also be factored in reviewing SRPs of basic goods. Lopez adds the food industry is starting to recover. It's one of the few sectors allowed to operate despite the lockdowns imposed since last year. For Stephen Kua, president of the Philippine Amalgamated Supermarkets Association, it would be better to let consumers decide which items to buy instead of posting SRPs.
Kapag mahal ang tindahan, competition will keep us in check. Pag mahal ang tindahan, alis yung customer, bibili sa kabila, di ba? So we cannot price ourselves, out of the market.
Supermarket operators are also asking the government to avoid flip-flopping on pandemic response guidelines so businesses can have a clear direction in planning their operations. Cian Arcangel, CNN Philippines.
Still ahead on Newsnight, K-pop sensation BTS is set to take a break this holiday season, but fans will still have something to look forward to while the group is gone. And a classic Christmas song rakes in 1 billion worldwide streams on Spotify. Stay tuned to CNN Philippines.
Scientists are collating data from around the country to try and understand the Omicron variant better. Now, positive numbers are starting to double on a daily basis in South Africa, and they seem to be centered here in Gauteng, in this province, where the numbers are rising at a rapid rate, and that's fueling the fourth wave. But the overall country positive numbers pale in comparison to parts of Europe. Hospitalization rates are also starting to increase, but doctors maintain that the severity of illness is still very low, and they still believe that vaccines work, even though what we're seeing is there has been some immune escape. In terms of the people that are dominating hospitalization, it remains among the unvaccinated and, interestingly, people below the age of 40. One number of concern, though, in Tshwane, we saw hospitalization rates with children under the age of 5 coming in at 10% of the total number. But scientists say that sometimes toddlers are put into hospital for an abundance of caution as opposed to severity of illness. But it's data that they're still collecting, and the situation remains fluid. The big questions: is it more transmissible? Does it cause severe illness? And what is the efficacy of vaccines? Eleni Jokas, CNN, Johannesburg.
Eternals took 5th place with $3.9 million, boosting its domestic total to $156 million. Christmas with The Chosen, a Fathom Events limited-run big-screen event based on the popular religious streaming series, came in 4th with $4.1 million. House of Gucci stayed in 3rd, taking in $6.8 million. Ghostbusters Afterlife made $10.4 million, for second place and a domestic total of $102 million. With no big new movies in theaters, Encanto kept its box office crown, earning $12.7 million for a domestic total of $58 million. In Hollywood, I'm David Daniel.
Welcome back to CNN Philippines. Lots to look forward to in the movies, from another team-up between Knives Out co-stars to the next animated Spider-Man film. CNN's David Daniel reports on the Hollywood Minute.
What?
Ana de Armas broke out opposite Chris Evans in 2019's Knives Out. Now they're teaming up again in the romantic action-adventure Ghosted. De Armas is replacing Scarlett Johansson, who was originally set to star in the project. Marvel has given us our first look at Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, the sequel to the Oscar-winning Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And since Marvel is billing this as Part 1, we can expect at least one more animated adventure after this film opens next October.
It was my opportunity to try things.
Speaking of Spidey, Tom Holland, the current live-action Spider-Man, is stepping into Fred Astaire's dancing shoes. Holland is set to play Astaire in a biopic about the legendary big-screen dancer, actor, and singer. Holland got his start dancing on the London stage and went viral channeling both Gene Kelly's Singin' in the Rain routine and Rihanna's Umbrella on Lip Sync Battle.
Worldwide sensation BTS is capping the year with some well-earned days off. The group's agency announced its extended period of rest for the holidays after activities in the U.S. The members will have their first Christmas with families since debuting in 2013. But fans have something to look forward to as they wait for the artist's return. Big Hit Music announced the next BTS album that will, quote, mark the beginning of a new chapter. 1 billion worldwide streams for a classic Mariah Carey Christmas song just a few weeks before the holidays, All I Want for Christmas Is You, grabbed the Spotify milestone. Mariah, dubbed the Queen of Christmas, tweeted her thanks to fans saying, quote, these numbers are incredible, but the love I have for the Lambily, the name for her supporters, is unquantifiable. Last week, the iconic holiday track also hit 10 million in U.S. sales. We have 19 more days before Christmas, and that is it for now. Join me again on News.ph at 7 p.m. I'm Thea Ontiveros for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
This program
A former Ifugao congressman seeks to represent indigenous people as he guns for a Senate seat in next year's polls. Let's get up close with senatorial aspirant Teddy Bagila. Teddy, thank you so much for joining us. You were elected a lawmaker in 2010, and before Congress, you served as Ifugao governor for 2 terms and as a mayor from 1995 to the year 2000. Bakit mo gustong tumakbo para sa Senado?
Well, as you mentioned, I would like to represent the indigenous peoples or the sectors who normally do not have adequate and effective representation in the Senate. Kasi if you look at the profile of the Senate, that's the political elite that we have in the Philippines. No? A lot of political dynasties, big business, no? Celebrities. No? But we don't have voices from the marginalized, no? Indigenous peoples included. Kasama na rin dyan yung mga magsasaka. Because while I'm not claiming to be a farmer, but I have fought for agrarian reform beneficiaries' rights of persons with disabilities, no, in the bills that I've pushed in Congress. So sa akin, this is a fight for people who do not normally have a strong voice in the Senate.
So, Teddy, ano masasabi mo sa mga kandidato who say they represent marginalized groups but they're not members of this group?
Yes, precisely. That's also the reason why we don't have a lot of progressive laws being passed in the Senate, because the interests are mostly with the elite, no, the people who are in power both politically and economically. Kaya nga, you know, if we need, for instance, to solve the problems of the agricultural sector, kadalasan the solution is band-aid solutions like rice tarification. No? But we don't address the roots of the problem, which is wanton land conversion of prime agricultural lands, which is the lack of agricultural investments in the agricultural sector in terms of infrastructure, in terms of credit assistance and capacity building to farmers. That requires very progressive legislation that addresses systemic problems within the industry. Pero sa ngayon, because the people who are in the Senate we're supposed to be passing legislation to address problems of various sectors, are there to protect their own interests, which is political dynasties and big business.
And you mentioned about the agricultural industry, no? This comprises a large chunk of our economy. At ang ating mga magsasaka, Teddy, have been suffering due to this COVID-19 pandemic. What should the government do to crack down on smuggled vegetables coming from China, which leaves Filipino farmers at the losing end?
Yeah, that's very important, no? Fighting smuggling, which is not just a recent phenomenon. It has happened in the past. Every time na pumapasok ang smuggled Chinese goods, no? Ang kawawa talaga is the farmers directly. Especially from my region, because my region, the Cordilleras, produces vegetables, highland vegetables for Metro Manila markets. No? So I think there has to be a stronger enforcement of the laws. It's a matter really of enforcing the law. There's always a law against smuggling. So kailangan palakasin pa natin, no, yung pag-prevent natin ng smuggled goods. Also at the same time, I think it's high time that we look into the industry as a whole, the vegetable industry, because it isn't really resilient at all. No? It's always subject to climatic changes, to natural disasters, to smuggling, no? Even in terms of the food supply chain, no? Ang mga gardeners, they're subject to the machinations of traders. And I'm not saying we should do away with traders, but the problem is with our food supply chain, there are just so many layers of trading. Kaya from the market, and let's say 20 pesos ang presyo ng isang kamatis, ilang layers of trading ang pagdadaanan niya. Finally, when it reaches the market, it's so expensive. So lugi yung farmer because the traders dictate the prices, and lugi rin yung consumer. So again, we have to look into the systemic causes of the problems of the agricultural industry.
At saka sa importation at saka sa smuggling na ito, no, Teddy, maraming sa ating mga kababayang magsasaka ang nawawalan ng hanap buhay, and many of them have lost their jobs. And of course, during this pandemic, many of our Filipino kababayans have also lost their jobs in many other industries. And right now, the economy is still weak and faces a long road to recovery. If you become senator, how will you try to jumpstart the economy and create jobs through legislation?
Well, nabanggit naman ni VP Leni yung programa natin. immediate na ayuda muna sa mga magsasaka. I think that's important. No? There are a lot of businesses who have shut down a lot, especially small and medium enterprises. So yun yung talagang kinakailangan bigyan muna ng support, no? Bailout, no? If you might say so. And ganun rin doon sa mga farmers na affected by this rice tarification. So double whammy Rice tarification, prices of palay. Sabi nga nung isang kausap ko na magsasaka, it's no longer profitable for them to continue farming, and then tinamaan pa ng pandemic, no? So we need to provide them with immediate assistance, no? And then, as I've said, look at the systemic problems, no, of the agricultural industry. Land conversion is one. In terms also of a major investment program in agriculture in terms of infrastructure. In my 9 years as a congressman and also 15 years, no, in the local governments, wala pa ako nakakita talaga ng malaking investment program in agriculture. I remember we have roads to tourism areas, okay? Help the tourism industry. We even have roads for small and medium enterprises. Pero our farm-to-market roads, wala. Our irrigations, a lot of our agricultural lands are not irrigated the whole year round.
Pero Teddy, korupsyon, problema rin ba ito sa agrikultura?
Definitely. Corruption is pervasive everywhere, whether it's in industry.
Paano ba natin lalabanan ito? How do we fight it?
Well, ang importante muna is, the leadership. That's very important because it begins, we're very personality-oriented. No? Ang laki ng ating tiwala sa Pangulo, whoever is elected as president, no? We place unto herself, no, the challenge of eradicating corruption, no, in the Philippines. Well, I always believe that corruption is dictated by our current political culture, no? Pero leadership really begins at the top because that's how we view our politicians. So if we're going to eradicate corruption, it begins first with the president, and then we have to look into our officials, the officials that we elect, and then the bureaucracy follows after. Because sometimes, no, sa ating kaugalian, no, may mga nagsasabi na ang corruption bahagi na yan ng kultura natin, which is not true, no? But yung mga give and take, yung pakisama, those are the things I've noticed, no, in my years in government. It's very, very difficult to fight that culture of corruption because people equate it as something that is a Filipino value, which is not, no? Which is not. That's why sa akin, it really begins at the top, and then we have to look now into laws that will provide or will strengthen more transparency in government. Isa nga ang tinutulak ko, Rico, is freedom of information.
Right.
It's something that I think would be able to engender more citizen participation in governance and be able to prevent instances of corruption. Kasi nangyayari sa Pilipinas, no? Corruption happens and then we investigate it. But if we have a law, progressive law such as FOI, then the citizens will have access to information about government transactions. So sa simula pa lamang, we might be able to prevent acts of corruption.
Oo. Yung pet dog mo dyan sa bahay, tumatahol, Teddy. I think he really truly agrees with all the issues that you are sharing with us. Apart from agriculture, you have also been a champion for different progressive advocacies on women, LGBTQI+. How do you plan to further these initiatives in the Senate?
Well, there's this anti-discrimination bill that I've fought for in the House of Representatives, no? Yung sexual orientation and gender identity and expression, no? Law. Maandar sa House pero hindi masyado sa Senado. No? So I think that's something that I will continue fighting for in the Senate. There's also this general anti-discrimination law, not just for the LGBT, but for all sectors who feel that they are marginalized or that are discriminated upon. No? Kasama na dyan ang katutubo, even senior citizens, no? Persons with disabilities. So this is a general anti-discrimination law, which I think we might be able to pass in the Senate if we have more advocates, no, in the upper house.
agriculture, anti-discrimination bill. What about sa droga, sa issue ng droga? How should the new government fight this war on drugs? Should it continue to adopt an ironclad, no-nonsense anti-drug policy?
Well, we have to look into the drug problem as a mental health problem. It's not just a matter of law enforcement. Of course, we always would have programs or a drive against criminality, a drive against drug addiction, but it's also a mental health problem. Kaya nga itong National Mental Health Law, which I was one of the authors, which is now passed, that's something that we can build upon, no? Because nagdodroga lang naman ang tao kung sila ay stressed, sila ay depressed, no? So when we look at health, it shouldn't be just the physical health, right, no, but also the mental health of Filipinos. It is also a social problem because of poverty. That's why people are forced to enter a life of crime, forced to be drug addicts. So those are the various dimensions of the drug problem. It's not just a law enforcement na kamao lang ang paraan, no? But we have to look also into the other social and mental health dimensions of the problem.
Teddy, before we end the first part of our interview, no, surveys are showing more familiar names leading this senatorial race. In the surveys that have been coming out, no, wala ka pa sa top 12 because you're up against long-time political personalities, and even some of them are from political dynasties. It will really be an uphill battle for you.
Yeah, it's something that I acknowledge. You know, sa Senado naman, it's about resources and popularity. It's a popularity game usually, no? So definitely, political dynasties have the advantage of logistics, the name recall. But I'd like to think that there's also a significant number of Filipino voters who are also looking for fresh faces. More progressive ideas, no? Fresh ideas. No? Like ako, I'm bringing in the perspective of a Katatubo. A Katatubo who fights for nature, who fights for the environment. That is something that we rarely discuss in the national halls of discourse, no? The climate action, no? Protection of our biodiversity. That is something that we, the Katatubo, can bring into the Senate. No?
And we will take this short break. We're speaking right now with former Congressman Teddy Bagilat. We will continue our conversation, up-close conversation with Teddy right after this. And we'll also give you a glimpse of what to expect once authorities allow more passengers in public transport tomorrow. Details next, right here on CNN Philippines. News you can use, news you can trust. Welcome back to the final word on CNN Philippines. I'm Rico Hizon. We still have with us for up close senatorial aspirant Teddy Bagilat. And Teddy, we have 2 minutes before the end of this interview, and I would like to ask you 6 questions, and please answer them with just a yes or a no. The first question is, do you favor easier public access to the statement of assets, liabilities, and net worth of the President, Vice President, and the members of Congress?
Yeah, definitely yes.
Do you support lifting foreign ownership limits in the Constitution?
No.
Do you favor the re-imposition of the death penalty for drug-related crimes?
No.
Should a sitting president be allowed to run for vice president in the next election?
No.
Do you favor resuming peace talks with communist rebels?
Oh, yeah.
And should the country be more aggressive in protecting its maritime interests in the West Philippine Sea?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And finally, Teddy, a brief message on why our kababayan should vote for you in the Senate in 2022.
Yeah, let's bring in other voices, no? Representing indigenous peoples, representing the fight for nature, fight for the environment, because it's something that I've been campaigning for in the past 9 years in Congress. It's also bring in variety in our national discourse. No? Is the reason why we're not having a lot of progressive laws that address the roots of our problems is because we have the elite class in the Senate who are entrenched because they are the ones that are elected time and again. No? So it's high time that we bring in other voices from a variety of sectors, no, in our society into the Senate.
Thank you so much for joining us on Up Close, Senatorial Aspirant Teddy Baguilat.